I'm reading Juniper, Furlong. We're on chapter 5. If you want to hear the first 4 chapters, they are on my page to read. So I'm not sure how they turned out, but anyway, so let's read. Chapter 5 of Juniper by Monica Furlong. Shivering and exhausted, I crept toward the fire, as an animal would have done, and sank down before it. I must have looked a terrible sight. My hair and clothes sopping wet, my limbs covered in blood and mud, my ankle beginning to swell. If Unni had uttered one word of sympathy, I would have burst into a flood of tears. Instead, she sat in silence, perfectly still. After a bit, she said, "There's a blanket on the bed." It occurred to me that she meant me to strip off my damp clothes and wrap myself in it. I looked around the room. There was a box bed in one corner, and I went over and took out the ragged blanket and put it around my cold shoulders. Meanwhile, I bowl with soup from the fire and set it on the hearth for me. I put a hand out of my blanket, grasped and battered spoon she gave me, and ate the odd bits of gristle in it and the strange flavor that I was so that I was to discover Uni's soup often had, but it sent a shiver of delight through me. It was hot and spicy, and I could feel some faint flicker of energy return to my exhausted body. "There won't be much food to eat here," Uni said, "so you needn't expect it." What I was wondering at the moment was where I was going to sleep. I had always slept in a bed with down pillows and linen sheets. I could see that there would be no room for me in Uni's tiny bed. "Please, where shall I sleep?" I asked at last. "On the hearth, of course," said Uni. "This isn't a palace, you know." She managed to inject a lot of scorn into that remark. She got up, went across the room, and fetched a furry skin. It had an odd smell that I didn't like at all. "This will keep you warm," she said. Now I had another problem. Every night of my life, Erit had helped me take off my clothes, brushed my hair, and tucked me into bed. Every morning she had bathed me, dressed me, and braided my hair. I had no idea how to do any of it for myself. It had not occurred to me that anyone dressed and undressed without help. "Please, will you help me undress?" I asked. Uni laughed, a bark of a laugh, not not altogether unkind, and without a word went back to her rocking chair. I realized with astonishment that she had no intention of giving me any help. With humiliating difficulty, I managed to get Sorry about that. I think with humiliating difficulty, I managed to get my clothes off and comb my hair. I remembered that the little owl was still in my pocket, so I took him out, stood him on a beam, and fed him a tidbit of mouse I had brought from home. I was nervous that this would provoke further rudeness from Uni, but to my surprise, a broad smile spread across her face. How just like you, she said, as if she were laughing at a private joke. Since she scarcely knew me, I could not see how she knew whether it was like me or not. Later, I laid curled up in Uni's fur rug, half of it beneath me, protecting me from the cold of the flagstones, half of it above me. Now that I was inside and the smell was overpowering, my head lolled uncomfortably on one of the creature's paws. There was warmth from the fire, though the shifting of the ashes disturbed me at first. Tired as I was, I went quickly to sleep, but woke long before dawn, cold and miserable, and hating the sound of Uni's snores from across the room. It seemed to me that I might have made a terrible mistake, that although Uni had told me to come, she was not glad, as I had expected her to be. In any case, I would never survive the discomfort and squalor of life there, with no one to dress me and take care of me. Great tears of self-pity ran down my cheeks. I sat up, my body cramped and frozen. It was not light yet, but I could leave as soon as it was dawn. My torn smock hanging over the rocking chair near the fire had dried in the night. I had to dress and leave before Uni awoke. Just then, however, my ankle jarred with a pain as I moved. I could see how badly swollen it was. I would never manage the long walk home. I groaned and curled back again into the strong smelling skin. I must have dozed because the next thing I knew it was light, and I could hear Uni moving around and smell ham frying. Thought you'd be hungry this morning, said Uni. This is the last of the old pig. It's a bit high, but it'll do you good. We'll kill the next pig before winter. She handed me a plate. It didn't look like a very clean plate to me, with a bit of fried ham and a hunk of black bread on it. She was quite right. I was very hungry, and although the ham had a rancid down together with the black bread and some lumpy porridge she was stirring over the fire. I can see you'll eat me out of house and home, Uni said in a cross voice. Get dressed, wash yourself, comb your hair, try to look like a human being, even if you can't look like a princess. Obediently, though very slowly, I washed myself clean in the freezing water, combed my tangly hair, put on another of the smocks in my bundle, and tied on my sandals. I was surprised to find I could do it all by myself. Now sit down, said Uni. We need to talk. Stiff and tired from my long walk and my night among the ashes, and still rather hungry, I sat miserably down, my swollen ankle in front of me. Before we talked, Uni selected some herbs and tied them around my ankle. Walk on it, she said, but not too much. My ankle hurt badly with each step I took. Now, she said, I expect you to feel very hard done by this morning. In this are the splendors of the palace. She sounded as if she was gloating, and I was too angry to trust myself to speak. Children might be very polite to grown-ups, but I am a poor person, not rich like your father, and this is the way poor people live. I knew because Erlaine had told me that Uni had been offered a house at the wooden palace and all kinds of presents by my father, but that she had always refused. As if she guessed my thoughts, Uni went on. I find life easier this way. Let me tell you why I think you are here. I won't talk much about it after today, so listen carefully. What I know about not the sort of power your father has with soldiers and armies and weapons, but a power that comes from knowing. I know a lot, I said, eager to please. I know Latin, about the stars, and mathematics and poems. Not that sort of knowing, she said, interrupting me rather contemptuously. That sort just gets in the way, makes you think you are clever, like weapons make men think they are strong. My sort of power is about seeing into the future, seeing into someone's heart and mind. Sometimes it is about knowing what a tribe or people must do to escape danger. Sometimes it is just about understanding yourself or one other person. Seeing and knowing and being very truthful about what you see and know. They make things begin to happen. Maybe more things than battles and armies. Sometimes they prevent bad things. I thought of the moment with Gamel on the hillside, but did not feel like mentioning it. So, could I have the power? I asked. It is too soon to say. It is possible, but you may spoil it. How? I asked anxiously. By wanting it too much, or by using it badly. And if I don't spoil it, what the powerful ones call adoring. And that might be very important for your father and his kingdom. But it is a long, difficult path, and it may be too much for you. It won't, I said, determined not to miss my chance. Besides, you don't like the idea when you know more about it. I thought that was very unlikely. I remembered Gamel's question. Is it only women who became Dorans? I asked her. No, but there are more women who take that path. Men prefer to put their trust in weapons and fighting. They don't know it, but it makes them weaker. Asking Gamel's question had reminded me of something else. Is Mira a Doran? I asked Uni. Her face darkened and her lip curled with scorn. Mira only uses magic to make other people do what she wants. I remembered my own fantasies of doing just that. Is that bad? I asked timidly. It is wicked, Uni replied with a terrifying emphasis. Then, with the air of one who has had more conversation than she is used to, Uni stood up and packed some bread into a basket before hoisting it onto her back. I have work to do today, she said, so you'll just have to stay here. Light the fire and make some soup for supper. I'm not sure if I'll be back by nightfall. When Uni had gone, I spent a little while sitting glumly in her rocking chair, my sore ankle propped up in front of me. Now that I was alone, I examined the room in more detail. There were the ashes of the fire, and hanging above it, the chain, which held a griddle and a kettle. There also hung a large piece of mutton, left to blacken in the peat smoke. That, and no doubt the tallow lamp made from mutton fat, gave the hut an unpleasant smell. Beside the fire was a basket of peats, a little brush for cleaning the hearth, the lamp on a shelf, and a small stool. In addition to the rocking chair, the skin rug, and the bed, the room contained a rickety table and an upright chair, a rather dirty woven rug, and a bowl and a jug. Some cups and plates on a simple dresser, a hand mill with meal spilling out of the top, and a jug with some milk. In a corner stood a wood pile with some sticks lying on top, and a tinder box on the floor beside it. There were dried plants hanging from the ceiling and the remains of the pig's carcass. Uni owned nothing, it occurred to me, that was not absolutely necessary to keep her warm or fed, and I thought with wonder of the way she had refused my father's offer of money and possessions. The books, the musical instruments, the goblets, the jewels, and the fine clothes to which I had been accustomed at home seemed unimaginable here. What was I to do with myself all day? Uni had gone and might not be back till the morrow, and there was I, all alone with nothing at all to do, and only able to walk with difficulty. And so, as so often since the day out with Gamel, I tried to talk to Moon, but he did not stir from his daytime sleep. I had never before lit a fire or attempted to cook, but because I was so cold and would soon be hungry again, I thought I had better learn how. I thought I lighted then of peat, piece of wood and earth, and set some moss on top of them. Then I struck at the flint. Even when the sparks fell on the dry moss, the little fire seeds faded. I tried time after time, feeling more and more irritated. After a bit, it occurred to me that the twig might light more easily than the wood. This time I transferred the moss to the twigs. The twigs sizzled a little, and the fire would light, but still I did not succeed. I sat back on the rocking chair and looked despairingly at the cold hearth. Other people could light fires. Why was I so stupid? Then I remember seeing servants at home sweeping up the ashes and carrying them, such hope of it making a difference. I took down my pyramid of wood, cleared away the ashes with a shovel, and laid beside the hearth, relayed the fire, and repeated the procedure with the logs. This time, to my delight, the twigs flared up, making a generous blaze, and soon the logs were aflame. I felt very proud of myself. There was still some soup left in the cauldron, and although it was only mid morning, I heated it up and ate it with some black bread that I had found on the dresser. I noticed the same odd taste that I had noted the night before. I later discovered that Uni had a way of throwing whatever food she had into her soup. Not just bread and cheese, but meat or even offal together, with any herbs that came at hand. It did not always taste nice, but I would have to devise another for our evening meal. My hunger appeased. I went out to look at the pig and the chickens Uni kept. The pig was a huge black beast that lived in a sty behind the hut. It grunts and snufflings had disturbed me more than once during the night. The chicken's white feathers looked dirty and bedraggled, but I was glad to know they were already lying inside the hen house, and I carefully collected. I saw that Uni was growing some cinnamon and some beer corn. There were two stunned apple trees with a few apples left on the boughs. Time hung very fast for the rest of that day. I talked a bit to Moon, hoping as always that he would reply or even give me some advice, but he merely blinked and went back to sleep. Limping painfully, I drew some water from Uni's well, washed the smock I had worn the day before, and hung it over the chair to dry. I washed my hair too and let it dry in the bright, warm noontime sunshine. I carefully arranged blocks of peat on the fire and loved the smell as the fire reached them. Mindful of the charge to make some soup, I managed to persuade a little more meat from the pig's carcass and added some water and herbs and a little meal. But it was a poor, thin broth. When darkness fell, I ate the soup with a couple of the eggs and the rest of the black bread and some milk, reluctantly saving what was left of the milk for the next morning. Before I put the fire as much as possible and wrapping myself once more in the strange smelling animal skin, I lay down before the hearth. The fire threw alarming shadows onto the walls of the hut. The silence outside felt ominous to me, except for the occasional scream of a rabbit caught by a stoat or a fox. I could hear nothing at all, but I imagined outlaws surrounding the hut, preparing to break into it. Because of my fears and the discomfort of the floor, I slept very badly. The shifting and sighing of the fire disturbed me. There was a growing feeling of cold as the night drew on. I don't like this at all, I thought, no matter how much power I get out of it, nor how important it is to be adorned. I could marry the son of a neighboring prince, or even the son of one of the knights, and all the other girls do. That would be my life, cold and hungry in a place like this. As soon as Uni returns, as soon as Uni returns, I will tell her, and then when my ankle is better, I will go back home. Feeling that I had settled something, I rearranged the skin and sank into a sound sleep. I was woken several hours later by Uni lifting the latch and entering the hut. Chapter 7. Although I had decided so firmly to leave Uni, I found it difficult to get around to telling her about it. Perhaps because I was a little afraid of her. I thought that some marvelous thing might still happen that would make it worthwhile to live there. On the second morning, when I woke up cold and stiff, Uni decided promptly that my ankle was better, though it felt far from better to me, and sent me out before breakfast to collect 2 buckets of water from her well, to get the fire, and to wash my face in the cold water and comb my hair. All this before our very meager breakfast of porridge. Please, what am I going to give Moon? I asked her anxiously. At the wooden palace, I always begged the contents of the mouse traps from the cook, or she had given me other scraps left from our meals. There are plenty of field mice around here. Let him go and hunt for himself, said Uni. I looked up anxiously at Moon. Suppose he starved because it did not occur to him to seek his own food. Actually, I was still fairly hungry myself, though trying hard not to notice it. I thought that we would now settle down to lessons as I would only in something much more interesting, like spells. But it didn't turn out that way. After a brisk tidying up of the hut, that is, I tidied it while Uni looked on and made sarcastic comments. We went out for interminable walk in which Uni sought roots for some medicine she wanted to make. It was chill. It was a chill, windy day, and we marched for hours over meadows and through woods. Every now and then, the dig up intact. I had no tool apart from a stick and my fingers, and in no time my pretty nails were full of earth, and my hands and smock were filthy. The only time she spoke was to give me long explanations of what the roots were and what they might be used for, which I promptly forgot. In contrast to Uni, who walked lightly and quickly, looking about her as if everything was interesting and must be noticed, I shuffled along sullen and miserable until I began to make refuge in comforting daydreams. How many birds? Uni asked suddenly. How do you mean? There was a row of birds sitting on a branch. How, of course, I had no idea. I had not even seen the birds. This unpleasant trick, I was soon to discover, was a favorite one of Uni's. She was given to precise, detailed questions. What color was the roof? What color exactly had the sky been? What direction was the wind blowing from? What animals had I noticed? Where were they? What flowers had I seen? She would ask, but I never knew the answers. It made me feel very silly. What I was thinking about was not the number of birds, nor the direction of the wind, but the bliss of returning to the comforts of Castle Door. I reflected that as the winter came on, life, which was already hard at Uni's, would become intolerable, with the cold, hard floor feeling even colder at night, and the hunger becoming even more painful. It would be lonely, too. I had been with Uni only a day and a half, and already I was missing Aerith and my parents and other children to talk to. It was at this point I remembered that, after all, it was Uni who had asked me to come, and I thought that perhaps, as I was her godchild, she held some affection for me that she found difficult to show. Did you sort of want me to come? I asked her timidly in the middle of the dark forest. I hoped for some sort of declaration from her that she loved me and was pleased that I was coming to live with her. It's all one to me, she said disappointingly, but there was something even more fundamental that I needed to know. Only I scarcely knew how to ask the question. I know what you said yesterday, but I still don't see how what I am here for. I got out at last. Una gave a heavy sigh as if this were an unreasonable bit of curiosity on my part. Earth, air, fire, water, she said, and stopped. Like my rhyme, I said with interest, remembering my neck charm. Well, there you are. I didn't seem to be anywhere. There are things I can do, I said. I can find water hidden underground. I can heal people sometimes. I can see into the future. And once I thought I heard Moon speak. Don't boast, she said sharply. But what does it mean? It means that you must do exactly what I tell you. To make it all worse, it began to rain during the afternoon. But in spite of that, we did not make for home. Cold and wet, with the rain plastering my hair to my head, carrying the full basket of roots, hungry because we had not eaten since the meager plate of porridge at breakfast, I stumbled along behind Uni, now with my mind fully made up Tomorrow I would get up early while Uni was asleep, grab my things, and set off for home. I might even leave my things behind, I reflected, in case collecting them would wake Uni. After all, there was plenty more clothes at home. I pictured Eris' rapt- rapturous welcome and all the sympathy I would get as I told my story. I also felt a spasm of shame that I did not quite understand. I was very tired now, and the long day's walk had caused my ankle to swell again. It was dark by the time we got to the house, but Uni entered it without hesitation and kept up a steady pace that, exhausted as I was, I found hard to match. I wanted nothing but sleep. My former raging appetite had died down now. When we came to the forest, there was a moon that showed the stepping stones across the stream. It swam huge and golden over the shoulder of the Tor and outlined the roof of Uni's hut. This was magical enough, a scene so beautiful that in spite of my exhaustion, I felt transfixed by it. But there was something more. Standing between the Tor and the hut, its branches silvered by the moonlight, quivering a little in the night breeze, stood the hazel tree I remembered from my dreams. My tiredness and hunger forgotten, I stood still and stared at the tree, stammering with excitement. The hazel tree, the tree in my dream, it's here. To which Uni, to whom I had said nothing about my dream, replied, well, it's been here all along. You could have noticed it by daylight if you weren't so absent-minded. You'll have to do better than that. And she went on into the hut. As I stood, still transfixed by my discovery, I heard the brush of wings overhead and looked up to see white and ghost-like flying above me, seeking his food had recommended. Softly, I have found the hazel tree, at which he circled around me twice and acknowledged, continuing to on his hunting trail. Chapter 8. And so my life with Uni began. She was an odd mixture of busyness and laziness. She did not care at all about the state of the hut and spent most of the day sitting in her chair in front of the fire, sometimes humming tunelessly, just still and quiet. Yet she had periods of extraordinary energy. Alone or taking me with her, she would walk for long distances, as on that first dreadful day, walking so quickly that I found I was out of breath trying to keep up. Often she was making for a hill, a forest, a ring of trees, or of stones. Once there, she would search diligently for some particular spot. I could never work out where it was going to be, and having found it, would stay, singing a wild, tuneless song, muttering words that sounded like poems. Her eyes would be closed, her face set and concentrated. She smiled to herself quite often, but sometimes her expression would change to one of pain. She never said anything to me before or after these occasions, just let me stand there on whatever windswept hill or moorland we happened to be. Shivering and rather frightened, I wanted to ask her to explain these times to me, but I never had the courage. Soon after my arrival, we had climbed our own Tor. Its sides were steep and gaunt like the ribs of a giant, and I felt my heart pounding. I could see our tiny hut a mere speck at the bottom, and there was a wonderful view of the forest and hill, with the Tor glasswern and a village with its plowed fields away in the distance. On this occasion, Uni neither laughed nor wept, but simply stood quietly, looking at the little wattle and daub hut that stood on the crest of the hill. Within it, like a queen in a hovel, was an extraordinary carved and painted figure, set in a kind of cave made of stone. Her face was black, her eyes dark and wild, and upon her head she wore a crown decorated with a moon and stars. Her gown was blue and red, and sitting upon her lap was a baby, awkward and doll-like. A wreath of hedgerow flowers, the last beautiful flowers of autumn, intertwined with berries, had been hung around her neck, and others were strewn at her feet or thrust into little pots. At her feet was a well, its its ancient wooden lid beautifully carved with flowers and animals. There were candles, too, set around the rim of the well, one or two still alight. The others burned out as if many people had visited the place and left a burning candle as a memento of their visit. Unni, always so dry, so caustic, astounded me by suddenly prostrating herself on the floor while I stood awkwardly by. When she got up, I saw her face was wet with tears. Then she opened the well, threw in the dipper on its long chain, drank a little of the water, and replaced the dipper without offering any water to me. On the way back to the hut, she was silent. Only when we had nearly reached it did she say sternly to me, "You are not to climb the tor, nor visit the place of the mother, unless I tell you to." Immediately I felt irritated and as if I might wish to do so, though that steep climb would not otherwise have been much of a temptation. In fact, Uni was full of instructions about what I might and might not do. From the moment she woke me each day from my uncomfortable sleep, usually very early in the morning, she ordered me out to draw water, to grind meal, to start up the fire, to make porridge, to gather sticks, to sweep, to feed the chickens, and to chop up scraps for the pig. I did not mind doing these things since they helped us to keep warm or fed, or meant that the plates and pots were cleaner than when she washed them. It did annoy me, however, to see her sitting in the rocking chair not helping, while I swept or cooked or cleaned the ashes from the fire, or staggered in with the pails of water. It made me feel that I was her servant, which I didn't like at all. Once on a bad day, I mumbled my resentment at her, and she replied with one of her crows of glee, "Yes, you are my servant. This is exactly what you are." My only comfort was that I did at least keep the hut cleaner than she did, and that I soon learned to cook nicer meals. The two most painful things about life with Uni, however, were cold and hunger. In my privileged life in the wooden palace, there had always been a fire blazing on the hearth, and I had always been warmly dressed and well fed. Life in the hut was very different. The thin walls did not keep in the warmth of our fire, and every night I woke up shivering so that I felt tired and miserable the next day. As the winter approached, I went out gloveless in all weather on my innumerable errands for Uni, and my cloak and boots, made for life at Castledore, were not thick enough to keep out the damp and the cold. Soon I had chilblains on my hands and feet, which became very sore and drove me half mad with irritation whenever I did get warm. Uni showed no sympathy for my shivers or my chilblains. Once, when I complained, she said, "You came here to make your life real. Cold, hunger, and the hard floor to lie on. These are your teachers." If they were my teachers, I reflected angrily, then they made me very miserable. Yet I could not help noticing when I next picked up my spoon to eat my soup that since I had almost no food at all, the soup tasted better than any soup I had ever eaten in my life. I was as it was as if my whole body had suddenly become alive and was singing. The flavor of every bean, grain, and vegetable in the soup spoke to me. Even the water I drank tasted wonderful. Was it just the purity of Uni's well, or was it that desperately hungry as I was, my mouth was wonderfully alert to enjoy all that entered it? Similarly, when I came in half a dozen from a series of trips to the wells, there was a special kind of joy in letting the warmth of the fire steal through my cold body, though the torment of the chilblains spoiled it a little. It also occurred to me that I had never noticed the change from autumn to winter as sharply as I did now. Before, I was dimly aware, as everyone is, of the falling of the leaves from the trees, the coming of the frost, and the short, dark days. Now, partly perhaps because of my fear of cold and hunger, I noticed that no 2 days were the same, and as the year declined, there were changes of the sky and stars and the behavior of birds that I had never known before. Not, of course, that I was ever observant enough for Uni. What were the clouds like, she asked, as ever, when I returned from an expedition. Did the wind change? What birds did you see? Which trees have lost all their leaves? What shrubs still have flowers upon them? What was the moon like? It had been my habit to walk through the world in a pleasant dream, remembering stories or conversation, going back over bits of the past I had enjoyed, or having romantic fantasies about the future. Uni did not seem to understand this at all. You are hopeless. Hopeless, she told me angrily. You will never make a Doran. I was wounded by this, and sulkily tried to remember to notice the sort of things she asked about. But she was but she had an unnerving way after I had made a point of counting the birds or observing the clouds or of picking on something quite new. The shape of the landscape, the number of the footpaths, and the way they joined one another. The appearance of the people we had met by the wayside or animals. I tried harder, but it seemed to be no use at all. In addition to hunger and cold, I realized that I was also struggling with silence. Uni sometimes went all day without addressing a word to me. In desperation, I had long conversations with Moon and with Bora, the pig, standing beside his sty and scratching his back with a stick. Uni often fed Bora scraps, and sometimes I stole one or two of them for myself before giving them to him. He, after all, was very fat, whereas I was much thinner than I used to be. I enjoyed Bora's grunts, but I would rather have talked to another person. Do you ever feel lonely? I asked Uni once. There was a long silence. Sometimes, she replied. Don't you mind? She made a gesture like pushing something away from her. I am used to it. It doesn't matter. When the chores were all done, Uni expected me to sit still as she did, she in her rocking chair and I on a cushion on the hearth. I hated doing this and soon learned to spin out the chores so that they kept me busy for much of the morning. But sooner or later, there was nothing to do but to go back into the hut and sit down. Half a day would pass without conversation or movement. Sometimes I fell asleep upright, since Uni saw no reason for me to lie down during the day. Always I yawned and fidgeted. It's very boring, I said unwaringly once. Good, said Uni, and spoke no more. Not for the first time. I hated her. I spent the time dreaming of food. There was something that I began to mind more than the cold and the hunger. It was the feeling that while I was enduring all this discomfort and Uni's wounding sarcasm, I was learning nothing about the special sort of power that was the gift of the Doran. I had supposed that Uni would sit me down and instruct me properly in the use of herbs and ointments, helping me to understand as all my other teachers had done, instead of merely tossing off a comment about a plant now and then. But when I saw Uni working on her medicines and asked for information, she would wave me away with, "It's not important," as if the whole time were a secret, and suggest that it was time for me to get on with feeding the pig. How will I learn if you never teach me anything? I asked crossly one day. She did not bother to reply. First thing that ever happened in the first part of my chapter 9, sorry. The worst thing that ever happened in the first part of my stay with Uni was the day she spent a long time sharpening the big knife on a stone by the door, and then offered it to me, said to me, and I gazed at her in puzzlement. "The pig," she said. "Kill it." I stared open mouthed at her, looking from her face to the gleaming knife in her hand. "I couldn't possibly," I said. I remembered the horrors of pig killing on the farms around Castledore, the squeals and the flowing blood. I had always shuddered and hurried back to the life of a princess. Someone has to do it, said Uni, so why not you? Please don't make me, I begged her. Already my experience of Uni should have taught me that this was the worst possible way of going about things. I have noticed that you like to eat pig meat, Uni said haughtily. The old carcass is empty. If you don't kill the pig, there will be no meat for you. You don't mean it, I said. Fat bacon was most of our diet. I knew she did mean it. Furious with her, I snatched a knife out of her hand and I went to the pig's sty. Bora had become a good friend of mine by now. At the sound of my footsteps, he looked up expectantly. I hid the knife behind my back and talked kindly to him, noticing the life in the bright little eyes, the pleasure in his grunts. I went back to Uni. I can't do it, I said, throwing down the knife. It's cruel. So we shall starve to death, she said triumphantly, as if the prospect pleased her. I tried to argue with her. I don't understand. I thought the Dorans loved the creatures of the world and wanted to care for them. What could show more love for an animal than eating it? Replied Uni. But you are taking its life away from it, all it has, for it to become part of the life in you. You are being false. What you will discover if you stop being interested in yourself for long enough to notice the world around you is that of other life. But not Bora. He's so sweet and I love him so much that I cannot kill him. But sweet or not, you would eat him if I killed him. Is that not right? Shamefaced, I was forced to nod. I knew that I had only to smell bacon cooking to feel a wild hunger. So long as you don't have to feel responsible for killing him, so long as the princess does not get blood on her hands, wonderful. Uni's scorn hurt me, but I minded it even more when she picked up the knife and handed it back to me. Hurry up, there's a lot of work to be done on the carcass, and we need to start while there is still plenty of daylight. I left her again, but instead of going back to the sty, I began to pace around the bottom of the pit. I had never been spoken to in my life. It spoke to me, and it left me helplessly angry. It was then that I noticed I was brandishing the knife furiously in the air, and suddenly I observed with a faint glimmer of unexpected amusement that what I was doing in my mind was plunging the knife into Uni. I couldn't kill a pig, but I had a secret longing, at least just for that moment, to kill her. Yet I knew that my future as a Doran was linked to my obedience to Uni, that she would refuse to teach me if I did not do as she said. I paused outside Bora's pen, praying to his spirit to forgive me. This time I did not hide the knife, and he looked at it without fear. I held his head in one hand, and the other slipped the knife beneath his chin, my heart pounding. I pushed the knife against his throat. Immediately, Bora began to struggle, and with tremendous force, he threw me back against the wall. I had not even cut him. Frightened now at the furious creature, I put the knife straight to his throat, shouting to him, begging him at the top of my voice not to resist. The knife made only the smallest cut, but suddenly blood began to flow, and the knife itself was slippery. Bore back against the wall with a squeal that rang sickeningly through my head. I wounded him again, but he was still full of fight and began to come after me with his head lowered, making a strange growling noise in his throat. For a while we circled each other, back me, but afraid of the night. Me wanting to finish my terrible task, but afraid of the hooves and his powerful snout. Desperate, I lunged at him once more and knew from his scream that I had hurt him, but also that this big, angry animal was now going to charge. I moved as quickly around the little space of the pen as I could, until suddenly my foot slipped in the puddle of blood. I fell. At the moment, Bora almost fell, and I could hear his dreadful, labored breathing as he lay on his side. Swiftly, I stood up and had his windpipe properly. Although his legs twitched a bit, I knew he was within seconds of death. Bora, forgive me, I said to him. This was not my choice. White, shaking, covered in blood, I went back to the hut. For a moment, I was too upset to notice that Uni was not alone. Indeed, that hut seemed to be full of people. There was my mother, looking her most beautiful, her delicate pale face framed in a collar of fox. There was Eris, shocked at the sight of me. There was Gamel standing by the hearth, sympathetically, and beside him another boy about our own age who stared at me in open amusement. I stood there looking mutely at them, blood-stained, my hair falling over my face, the knife in my hand. Okay. My mother made a small, stifled exclamation as she caught sight of me, and then was silent. Eris was less restrained. You look awful, she said. I've killed the pig, I said unnecessarily to Unni, not knowing what else to say. Unni, quite unruffled by the company, nodded with a small pleased expression, took the knife from me, and suggested that I should change my smock. Gamel, trying to act as if all was as usual, introduced me to Finbar, a new page at my father's court, who had come to carry food and warm clothes, which my mother and Eris had prepared for me. Even in these circumstances, you're okay. I noticed that he was a very handsome boy, with brilliant blue eyes and black hair. As I tried to speak to my mother, Finbar, where she could not see him, was pointing at me and silently pretending to hold his sides with laughter like mocking jester behind the throne. I thought he was the rudest boy I'd ever met. Later, my hair combed and wearing a cleaner smock, I walked with my mother to the foot of the strange shaped hill. A jumble of feelings fought inside me: humiliation at being caught looking so dreadful, anger at Unni for making me kill the pig, triumph at finally having done it, a apprehension about what my mother would say. Would she persuade me to return to Castle Door? I realized I had very mixed feelings about that. For a long time, neither of us spoke. So how is it? My mother said at last. I started to mumble some reply, but could not speak for the sob in my throat. My mother stood for a long time looking up at the steep sides of the hill as if trying to read something from it. Then she said, Of course you must come home, if it is too dreadful, but I don't know. I have a feeling that you want to be here, awful as it is. An extraordinary surge of gratitude ran through me. Gratitude that, although she was my mother, she could see and understand something that went beyond my thinness, my swollen fingers, and my own anger and perplexity. I began to cry in earnest because of her love for me, and she put her arms around me. Why do I have to? I asked her. I don't know. I felt so ashamed, I said, that you and Aerith and the boys saw me bloodstained from killing the pig, and that Unni and I live in such poverty. She lifted up her white profile and, looking like the daughter of a prince that she was, said, You were always a brave child, Ninnock. Knowing you, expected you would live this ordeal with courage. Life with Unni is hard, but it won't go on forever. She smiled at me. Don't despair. I don't understand it, I said, but I seem to need to be here, and yet it is awful. Good thing, one good thing went on, Erlane. We have brought you some food. Here. We had brought you some food, some snacks, some sacks of wheat and oats that should that and the pig, she smiled at me again. And Aerith put in some blankets and pillows and a thick woolen cloak, I said. Gamel has brought you some cakes and some wine. You should get a decent supper tonight. You do understand, I said in gratitude. I was humbled by my mother's generosity at her willingness to let me, her only child, follow a strange path. I flung my arms around her, and this time we both wept. I also had time to talk with Gamel. I shall come and see you sometimes, he said, and so will Finbar. He's become a good friend. I'm teaching him our language. His home is on the island, a long way north of England. He wants to be a navigator. I felt a pang of jealousy at Gamel's transparent enthusiasm for his friend. I don't like Finbar, I said. I think he is very like him when you know him better. You like him when you know him better. Everybody likes him. He's awfully funny and he's brave. It was important to ignore Finbar completely when the party left. I held out my hand and he kissed it, as was the custom, still taunting, it seemed to me, with mocking eyes. I hope you will come again, Gamel, I said pointedly. I felt very alone when they had all gone away, and I was back alone with Uni again. But I had no time to dwell on it, since Uni and I spent the rest of the day cutting up the pig, a tiring, messy business, so that it could be salted. We did cook some of it at once, though, and had a marvelous supper, which I ate ravenously. We won't starve this winter, said Uni with satisfaction, looking at the sacks stored in the corner of the hut. What did you do? I asked curiously. Survive, said Uni shortly. The trouble with being hungry or cold, I said thoughtfully, is that you think of nothing else. It's like having a pain. On the other hand, you really appreciate food to eat or a warm fire. I never knew food to taste as good as it has these last few weeks. Uni grunted. I didn't know I could kill anything, I said, still minding about Bora, even though he tasted very good. Uni smiled a wrinkled, leathery smile that I had never seen before. You were a good, obedient girl, she said. You didn't give me much of a choice, I replied crossly. I am proud of you, she said, and I could scarcely believe my ears. And that's all I'll read for now. I'll have to read the rest later. So it's getting kind of weird. Hi, anybody? If anybody's in here. Hi, Dee Dee. Hi, Token Steve. Hi, Lashko. Hi, Charlene. Hi, Crystalline. You eat milk? Laugh out loud. Thank you so much. I just trying to read this book. My kids don't always let me read. I think I ended on chapter 9. No, I think I got to chapter 10. Yep. So I'll have to read chapter 10 next time. I think it only goes to 25 chapters, but it's a story about like a princess girl with an owl. She has a pet owl named Moon. We tried to save some owls before. I fed this one. I think it got hit by. I think we found it. It was either the night of the. I think it was the night of the 4th of July, and I think it got hit with the fireworks. And we tried to save it, and I had it eating, and I was gonna send it to like a bird sanctuary place, but then it didn't make it. It was a oh, why can't I think of what it is? It wasn't a barn owl, a great horned owl, yeah, but it was a young one, but it didn't make it, sadly. My family had rescued another owl when I was little, and that one didn't make it either. It was a big great horned owl. We have a lot of owls around here, though. How you doing, Charlene? I don't know if you're still here. I guess that was a while ago. I don't know if anybody's here. Say hi if you're here. I'm just gonna end this in a couple minutes. You know how many kids Lashko? Yeah, they're a lot of fun. They're a lot of work. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old. My 2-year-old's a special needs kid. She's pretty special. And then in 2 weeks, I'll have a 1-year-old. So it's really kind of crazy. But I also babysit my friend's little girls too. So most of the time, I have, like during the summer, I have 5 girls here. And it gets pretty crazy. We really kind of wanted a boy, but I don't know. 3 that I have are a lot of work, like I said. So sometimes I wish I had like as much energy as one of them. Seems like I used to, but my phone's making funny noises. Well, thank you all for coming. I'm trying to get watch time, so I'm reading stories. After I get done with Juniper, I'm gonna read about Haunted Rock Lake, which is a really awesome lake that I've been to before. The Native Americans thought it had like a sea serpent that eat their canoes. And they still talk about it, and most of them don't go on the lake. They say don't go on that lake. Which I put my feet in the water. We found a beach that you can walk down to, but most of it's all cliffs. It's like 300-foot cliffs, so most of it you can't get down to the water unless you go to like the boat launch. But yeah, kids are a lot of fun, but they're a lot of work. Sometimes I wish I was a kid and I didn't have bills. Most of the time I wish that, but I really like my kids. They're really awesome. We eat milk. It must have been some in the story. I don't know why, but that's you eat milk. Well, the baby does. But then my kids don't like milk, so once they're like past one, they just refuse milk because of all the weird crap in it. I think, which I've never liked milk very much either. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I'm going to end this now, and I will try to read the rest of the story, or I'll try to read 5 more chapters on like Monday afternoon. I do a show with my sister frequency channel, and we read cards on Monday at 10:30 Central Standard Time on the Fairy Free. So if anybody wants to come hear me read oracle cards over there, that's where I'll be. All right. Everybody have a great Saturday. Sun keeps going in and out. Bye.